There was a small debate amongst friends of mine and myself a couple of weeks ago. They didn't have any idea this is what I would be teaching on, but nevertheless, the conversation has stuck in my mind. I will bring the question to you, and that is about dreams. How many of you dream and remember your dreams? Let's just have a hand raised. Okay, cool. So if you don't remember your dreams, let me see your hands. Okay, how about that? That's a lot. So in this particular conversation, this friend of mine was like, hey, I don't dream. Which at first I was like, okay, man, that's unfortunate. That's really awful. As I started prepping for this message about a week and a half ago, I knew I was going to be talking about dreams today. And so that conversation kind of dawned on me. I was like, I remember that. So I was doing some research, and according to everybody that I've read, most scientists say that study these things that every single person dreams. Everybody dreams. It's just very few, there's a small percentage of people that remember nothing about their dreams. And so that's at least what I'm going with, right? So everybody's dreaming, not everybody's remembering about dreams. Now, what's really crazy is that last night I had a dream, and I remember the dream. I woke up this morning, and it was very vivid. I was on a basketball court, and there was a guy there, and I don't remember who he is. I can't even see a face. But there was a guy on this basketball court, and he was shooting free throws. And he said, hey, as a contest, who can make 10 free throws first? And I was like, dude, I'm in. Let's go. I mean, he's like, here's the caveat, though. We've got to shoot them at the same time, right? So we're going to stand on the line, and we're going to shoot these free throws. And I was like, deal. That's fine. No problem. And so I get the ball, right? I get the ball, and I've got incredible free throw form. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just bred in me. You know what I'm saying? I'm a baller. Shot call. And, Kobe. And so I get up there and boom, I'm just letting them go. I'm just 9 in a row, and I'm done. Let's go. Like I need one more, and I go and I get the next one, and perfect form, toes right on the line, and I go to let it go. It's a beach ball. It's a beach ball, right? And I'm like, whoa. And it's not working because it doesn't go. You know what I'm saying? And so all of a sudden I get another one, and basketball's there, and I go to let it go, and it's a volleyball. Right? And so it's much lighter, so I'm throwing, and it's not good. And so I go get another one, and it's a soccer ball. And it's all these kind of, and the beach ball keeps coming back over and over and over again, which I'm sure if you ask my wife what the interpretation it would be take me to the beach, right? That's for sure what she's thinking. That's not what it means. But for sure, every single time I get this ball, I'm like trying to make this shot. And so then I see a basketball roll across the gym, and I'm like, that's my ball. I got to go get it. So I run to the other side. The other guy is still trying to make his basketball shots. His are perfectly fine, right? He's just bricking everything. But he just can't make, but he's got basketball. So I go over there and get this ball. And as soon as I get it, I get back to the line. It's a beach ball again. And then I wake up. And I'm just upset. I'm just furious. You know what I'm saying? In my dreams, sometimes I do really stupid things. And I wake up and I'm terrified that it's real. It's like, oh my God, okay, I'm good. Woo! That was close because I was for sure going to prison. You know what I'm saying? I have lost things. I've lost things in my dreams that were super important to me. I don't remember what the things were that were important to me. I just know that I was just distraught over them in the middle of my dreams. And I woken up like, okay, no, I still have those things. I don't know what those things are, but I still have them, right? I feel like it's a dream. I've woken up and had dreams about people, and I'm mad at them. Have you ever had one of those? You wake up, you know what I'm saying, and you are just furious, and the other person doesn't even have a clue what's happening. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what's happening. Here's something for sure. There's not been a moment in my life where I woke up from a dream, and I was like, you know what? I need to go do what I just did in the dream. Never. Like that's not how I roll. I don't know. Like I didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what, let me go find a basketball court so I can go ahead and make my 10 free throws, which I would do just fine, no problem. Don't worry about it. If you're ever worried, I can hit 10 free throws, right? Like that didn't cross my mind at all. And when in any other time, I don't know if maybe it's just me, but dreams don't convince me to do things in the real world. They don't. And so when I read a story like we're going to study today, and I see that a dream was an enormous catalyst, it's difficult for me to put 2 and 2 together, The place that we find this story is in a book called Matthew. Matthew was a guy that was invited into Jesus' inner circle. He was a tax collector, so he wasn't a really great guy. He wasn't a really incredible guy in the community. But for sure, he was a guy that was very well known. And so when Jesus invited him into his inner circle to kind of be friends with him, everybody wasn't all that thrilled, wasn't all that happy about it. But Matthew ends up spending a lot of time with Jesus, spends a lot of time with the family of Jesus. And so he has the ability to then write down and to record what he learns about Jesus' family and the stories that he actually experienced firsthand and put his own eyes on the happenings. And so Matthew records for us a lot about what happened in Jesus' early life. In particular, Matthew is the first book in the New Testament. The Bible is broken into two very distinct parts. The Old Testament talks about the establishment of God's people and how we get to Jesus. And then the New Testament starts with Jesus and talks about how we get to who we are as the church today. And Matthew is the very first book in the New Testament. Matthew begins his book with this long list of names, name after name after name. They're families that these names are representing, and it's a genealogy, and it's getting us to Joseph and Mary, who are these parents of Jesus. At the very end of, it's about 16 verses or so of these names that are listed one after another, we come to verse 16 of Matthew chapter 1, and that's where we're going to pick up in this long list of genealogies. It says this, "And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who was called the Messiah. Thus there were 14 generations in all, from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah." And so he says, hey, here's the deal. We got Jacob, and then we got a guy named Joseph, and Joseph has a wife named Mary, and right there, we get Jesus. And he says, hey, I want to mark time with some pretty prominent moments or people. He goes all the way back to Abraham, who for the Jewish people, it was a big deal. God's promise of a people, of a nation came to Abraham. And so Abraham kind of kick-started this whole people of God thing. And so he said from Abraham to the exile, which we mentioned the exile a bunch over the last few weeks. When we go back to the story of Nehemiah building the wall, or Esther as queen, or even Jonah and his role in Assyria, the exile had pieces that were all a part of those moments and things, and the exile was huge. And so he talks about that as being a mile marker, and then he says 14 more generations to get to the Messiah, or to the anointed one, to the Savior, to the Christ, to get to Jesus. And in this moment, we have Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, and it's already an established fact. But to get there, we have to kind of back up just a little bit. Joseph had decided to ask the family of Mary, hey, can I have your daughter? And that happened, and that took place. And then they started an engagement period, which in this particular culture was as good as being married. And now they didn't live together. They didn't share a home yet. That would still come after the marriage was official. And a lot of times that could take up to a year. And they would kind of conclude with a parade. The community would be involved. It would be an incredible day. The groom would lead in this parade, and he would parade over to the bride's house. It was just this really special thing. Well, that day hadn't come yet, but they were engaged to be married. And all of a sudden, Mary shows up and is like, hey, here's the deal. I'm pregnant, right? Which for Joseph, that was a problem. That was a problem because he hadn't done the things that married people do in order for her to be pregnant, right? That hadn't happened. And so he was like, hey, here's the thing, girl. Like, look, I know how this works. And I know you and I haven't done that kind of work. And so this is a problem, right? This is a problem. And then, of course, I mean, what's she going to say? You know, she's like, well, it just so happens to be God. So about that. You know what I'm saying? What mother doesn't think their little firstborn is God? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's normal, right? You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, there's some tension. There's some problems here. And Joseph decides, I'm just going to divorce her. He cares for Mary, though. He doesn't, he actually could probably take her life. He could push for it, adultery, this whole, it could be a bad thing. He decides to do it quietly, right? Because he's in a lose-lose situation. He's in a lose-lose situation. So let's just say he decides, you know what? Okay, I'm going to marry her, right? I'm going to marry her. But then he's got, in this particular culture especially, honor was a big deal. And the way that you honored yourself, but also the way that you brought honor to your family was a huge deal. And so, okay, well, I'm going to marry this girl, but then she's got this kid, and We don't know who the dad is, and so that's a very dishonoring thing in this culture. And so it's like, what? That's a lose-lose. Even still, let's just say he's like, okay, I'm going to break this whole thing off. Well, then he's got to also deal with the idea of like, well, now his whole plan, everything he thought, everything as a good Jewish guy is breaking apart, that he chose someone he couldn't trust. Like how good of a judge, like what kind of family is that? And then Mary's family's got to deal with the dishonor. Like that's no good. Or he just pretends that it's his kid, right? That's what he does. And then there's still dishonor brought on his family because he didn't follow what Jewish families should do in a healthy situation, and they didn't wait till they were married, right? So it's just, there's dishonor everywhere for Joseph, right? He doesn't have a good option. Everything is falling apart. He had a plan, he had a dream, he had a vision for what he wanted his life to be, and it's coming undone. And that's when we get to the first dream. Matthew chapter 1, verse 20. But after he considered this, talking about divorce, but after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. So he has a dream. Like all this dishonor stuff is happening. He has a dream. And he wakes up. And you know what he does as a result of the dream? He marries Mary. Like he's like, hey, let's go forward with this. Because of a dream. Because of a beach ball. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what happened. He has a dream and he wakes up and it's like, you know what? All of a sudden, this terrible, awful thing that's happening is a good idea. Let's move forward. Let's move forward with this bad boy. Let's do it. Now, what we don't know in Matthew's account of the birth of Jesus that we learn in another guy's account named Luke, who was a historian. Luke was not a part of the inner circle of Jesus, but he does a very historically great job at recalling and interviewing people and writing down what happens. Luke tells us that when Jesus actually is born, that Mary and Joseph are together, but they're not in his hometown of Nazareth. They're in a place called Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is the hometown of Joseph. And so it's like this is where he's from, it's where his family's from. And so there's a guy named Quirinius. He was the governor of Syria. He wanted to count everyone. And so he had everyone go back to their hometown. And so Joseph and Mary ended up being there when it was time to give birth to Jesus. And so we know for sure that they're in Bethlehem. Now, what we also know, going back to Matthew's account, is that after he gives birth, or after Mary gives birth to the baby, we know that sometime afterwards, somewhere between a couple of weeks to up to 2 years afterwards, there's this group of men that show up called Magi. And we spent a lot of time last week talking in depth about the Magi, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. We know this group, these people from the east that Matthew recalls or refers to as Magi, and we think maybe Persia could be. There was a large Jewish community in Persia because of the exile, and there was people still there, so maybe they were aware of this Magi group. We don't actually know where it comes from, the east, and they show up in Jerusalem because they had seen a star. And at this particular time, when new stars appeared, there was just this thing, and they said, hey, that must be the birth of a noble, you know? And so we saw this star that surely represents the birth of a king. And so they go to Jerusalem to figure out, is there a king that's been born? And if so, where? Now, and a lot of times when we tell the story, we say, hey, the star led the wise men or the Magi or the we three kings, led them to the place where Jesus was all the way from the east. Well, that's not what Matthew says, and he's the one that tells the story about the Magi. Right? So for sure, they see the star. They go to Jerusalem because that's where they're inquiring about the king. Once they find out where it's going to be, he says, hey, it's King Herod, meets with them and says, well, I talked with my wise men, and they said there's a prophet who says it's going to happen in Bethlehem. And so when they go outside to start going to Bethlehem, which is about 6 miles or so from where Jerusalem is, that's when the star begins to lead them. And when the star leads them, it doesn't lead them to a manger and to a stable. Where does it lead them if you were here last week? Anybody remember? What was Jesus in? A house. Yeah, a house. And so last week we made sure we were abundantly clear, and hopefully all of you have made preparations and adjustments that your wise men are no longer in your nativity scene, right? And if you haven't made that adjustment, it's just the Bible. What does it know, right? So you just keep doing your thing, and you just fine. I'm on a crusade to make sure that people know, hey, the wise men were not in the manger. Put them somewhere far away. If you don't believe it, just go read the Bible. It's fine. It's in there, right? The wise men, the magi show up to a house. And remember, they show up to the house, and it says that they found the mothers, found Mary and the baby. And so they knock on the door, and Mary comes to the door holding like anywhere from a couple of weeks old to a toddler on her hip, right? And she comes to the door, and these magi like bow down and worship this baby. Like, can you imagine as a mom answering the door, and there's these guys from other countries with gifts that are like, hey, your son is like, I know you think he's special, but good gracious, we know he's got a star that led him to your house, and we've got gifts, and their faces are in the dirt worshiping this little kid that's like just dad, mama, like barely speaking, you know? I don't know what dad, mama is in Hebrew, but it's not that, right? But whatever that is, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what's happening. Just unbelievable. Now, King Herod had talked to the Magi ahead of time and said, hey, when you go and find this baby, will you come and let me know where he is? Because I also want to go and worship him, right? Now, what we know for sure is that that's not a good idea. And thankfully, it doesn't work out that way. When we take a look at verse 13 in chapter 2, just after the Magi leave, it says this: when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Dream number 2. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So this time in the dream, the angel says, get up, right? Now, I'm sure he doesn't want him to get up before he tells him the rest of the message, because then dreams don't work like that. He's like, hey, get up. But wait, hold on. Wait, stay sleeping for a second, because I got more. There's more to this. And say, hey, I need you to go to Egypt, because Herod's coming to search to kill the kid. And so what does Joseph do when he wakes up? He gathers his family and goes to Egypt. And so Egypt is not even the same continent, right? It's like Jerusalem is here. This is awful. I should have got a map. Jerusalem is here. He's got to come y'all can't see over there, way down here to another continent altogether. And so he wakes up in the morning and he has this dream, and he's like, man, cool, beach ball. Let's go to Africa, you know? And so he packs him up, and that's where they go. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Have y'all ever moved before? I mean, just moving from Fayetteville was a long ways, you know? Can you imagine moving not only just to another city or to another country, but another continent, you know? Because you had a dream, you know? Because you had a dream. I mean, it was a really cool dream. There was an angel in it, you know? Because of a dream. After they leave, King Herod issues a kill order for Bethlehem and the surrounding city, everything in the little vicinity there. 2 and under. Kills them all. Man. They're in Egypt. And we don't know how long this next piece lasts. Best guess is somewhere between 6 and 8 years because of who becomes king after Herod. When Herod dies, he splits his kingdom up between, he's got 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. And there's one in particular that's pretty notable. And it's a really awful guy, but he's got a history that other people outside of the Bible talk about his leadership and his rule in particular. And he was an awful guy. And so they put that around 6 A.D. or so. And so we're not exactly sure how long they're in Egypt, but for sure it's a number of years. So Jesus he could be anywhere from 4 to 8, 9, maybe even 10 years old. It just kind of depends. It's kind of fuzzy for how long they stay there. But they're there for a good little while. And we pick up when they're in Egypt. Matthew chapter 2, verse 19 says this. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Dream number 3. And said, get up and take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So now he's in Egypt. And then a number of years have gone by. And he has another dream. And he says, hey, go back to the land of Israel. The guy who's trying to kill your kid is dead. He's done. And so sure enough, the next day, they start making moves, pack up, and they start heading back to Israel. Just moving about. We fast forward just a little bit. It says, but when he heard that Archelaus was reigning, this is Matthew 2:22. When he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. And so was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Talking about Jesus being now called a Nazarene because he's going to grow up in Nazareth, right? And so he's headed back to the land of Israel. He's headed back to the promised land that God has given God's people. And Archelaus is now king. He's the guy that's going to be in charge of that particular area. Archelaus is awful. I mean, he's ridiculed in history. He was a terrible guy. He only reigned for about 2.5 to 3 years. And he was then completely wiped out, like exiled. You can't even come back. Like just a terrible guy. Worse than his dad, which is hard to believe when you murder that many toddlers. Just absolutely, just completely terrible. And Archelaus is there, and he's doing his thing, and he says, hey, Joseph's like, I don't know if I want to go. I know the one guy that wanted him killed is gone, but I don't know about this guy. Like, what's the deal? And so he has another dream and says, hey, no, go to Nazareth. Go to Nazareth. That's where we want you to be. Now, this is, let's just for a second, let's pause, and let's go all the way back. And the Bible doesn't tell us this. We see the result of this. Let's go all the way back to when Joseph decided, and maybe his family helped him decide, hey, I want to marry Mary. Let's go all the way back there, right? So when there was a decision that was made, and whether it was a family put the two together, or maybe Joseph actually liked her and the dad went to his dad. And who knows the specifics of the arrangement? The Bible didn't tell us. But there was a day when this decision was made, and they entered into a formal agreement to be married. They were officially engaged, and they started about a year's process. And so Joseph was a carpenter. Joseph was a small business owner in his little town, right? And so Joseph has got a trade that he's working. He's good at it. He's not just a carpenter that no one knows about. We learn a little bit later that his town knew that he was a carpenter and that Jesus was the son of that carpenter. And so he was good at what he does, at least good enough for people to know, hey, he built stuff out of wood. And so he's got a plan. He's got a business. He's now got a family that he wants to have with Mary. And so now he's taken his family, which is a good Jewish family, and he's combining it with Mary's family. And there's some connection there. And he's got his future wife, and they've started this time of engagement. And so he's got dreams. He's got plans. He's lived his entire life to be a good Jewish man. And he's doing those things. And he's following the law. And the law has blessed him because he's held what God wants him to do. And everything is lining up the way he wants it to line up. He's got the girl, he's got the job, he's got a great hometown, his family is honored, her family is honored, everything's going great. And all of a sudden she gets pregnant. You see, that wasn't his plan. In fact, it was completely out of his plan. Yeah, for sure. It doesn't tell us, but I'm sure maybe in my mind they wanted kids, right? They ended up having more kids. Jesus has some half-brothers that we learn about, right? And so, yeah, in time, that was probably part of their plan to have kids, but not this way. And certainly it wasn't Joseph's plan for her to have a kid with somebody else. That wasn't his plan. He had to pick up his family After he tells God, yes, okay, I'll go with the dream thing. I'll go with the dream. They end up living in Bethlehem for a little bit, up to maybe 2 years or so before the Magi show up. And then he finds out that the king wants to kill his kid. That the king, the guy with the most resources and the biggest army and all the searchability power in the planet, in his little planet, wants his kid dead. Can you just imagine? Like, hold on, what did I do this for? Like, how can I stop the Roman Empire from finding a toddler in a tiny little town? There's not many places to hide. And the answer is, you want me to go to Egypt? That's what you want me to do? And he picks his whole family up and he goes to Egypt. Freaking Egypt. And he's there for who knows how long? Number of years? And then when it's time to go back, finally he's like, hey, he's dead. You can go back. And just to find out as he's on his way back that the guy in charge now, just as bad as his dad. And you know where he gets sent? You know where he ends up? In a town called Nazareth. Nazareth. So it fulfills the prophecy that Jesus would be called a Nazarene. Now, that's all well and good, but let me just submit something for you to ponder for a second. Back to Luke's account, right? Historian Luke. Luke records this as Mary and Joseph are preparing to be counted in the census that Quirinius, governor of Syria, asked to take place. And this is what Luke records. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. Joseph is back in his hometown. Joseph started in Nazareth. Joseph was betrothed in Nazareth. Joseph was engaged in Nazareth. Joseph and Mary were from Nazareth. That's where they got hooked up at. Before they went to Bethlehem because of the census, before they stayed in Bethlehem for the Magi to find them, before they went to Egypt, before they were coming back to Israel, they were in Nazareth. The whole town still has no clue that the little boy is the Son of God. They have no idea. So when they go walking back into this old little tiny hometown, can you imagine the conversations? Like, isn't that Joseph? Oh, there's the boy. I bet that's the boy. Yeah, that's not theirs. That's not his, right? That's the boy. Isn't that the boy? Hey, let's have a Bible study so we can talk and see if that's the boy, right? You know what I'm saying? That's the boy. And so he's walking back into the town. No, in my mind, the Bible doesn't tell us. I'm just wondering, like, why would he live in Bethlehem? Why didn't he just go get counted in Bethlehem and then come back? I don't know, maybe it's because he didn't want to go back to his hometown. Because he didn't have to answer the questions. And again, what was he going to say? The truth? Son of God. Okay, Joseph, I'm never buying a chair from you again. You're delusional. You know? None of those things were his plan. None of those things were his plan. Let's go back. Let's go back to the night. Maybe it was a day. We don't know. Mary breaks the news. I'm pregnant. Right? Joseph goes to sleep. He has his beach ball dream. And he wakes up the next morning and he does exactly what I do when I have a dream. That was wild. That was nuts. Okay, moving on. What if that's what Joseph does? What if he has the dream? And he's just like, Sure am glad God doesn't really want to tell me something. You know what I'm saying? He just knows it's a dream. Because surely if God wants to tell me something, he can send an angel like real time, you know? What if he said no? What if Joseph said, God, I got plans. God, you already know my plans. For years, I've been devoting myself to your law. I live in this town. We're devoutly Jewish. I've got plans, God. Now, Mary has ruined this plan because she was a part of my plan, but I'm going to do the best I can for her, but I got plans. So take your beach ball, shoot it to some other hoop, brother, you know? What if that's what he said? Can you imagine what it's like to move your family running from one of the most powerful empires in the world that's trying to kill your kid? Can you imagine running on the run for years? What a wreck. What a disaster. If he had said no, if he'd said no, he would have missed out on being the only man to ever walk the face of the planet that can say they helped raise Jesus. Now, what a wreck that would have been. Just one guy in the history of the world can say, I raised Jesus. I raised Jesus, the Son of God, the catalyst for everything ever created, the Savior of all humanity, including myself. One guy. That's the difference between plans we make and opportunities God gives. That's the difference. That's the difference between plans we make and opportunities God gives. You see, part of this Davidic line, one of these really famous kings, a guy named Solomon, super wise, known for his wisdom. He writes a book in the Old Testament, or a big piece of the book of the Old Testament, and there's this saying in there. There's these little wisdom quotes in this book called Proverbs. And he says it this way. He says, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. In other words, we make plans, but God makes opportunities. We make plans, but God makes opportunities. And I think there's never been a better time for us as a church to have a conversation about plan versus opportunity. We are right in the heart of the Christmas season, where likely if you look at your calendar, you have plans. In fact, you might be full of plans. In fact, there's probably plans on your waiting list because you don't have any room to make any more plans. And that's the way it goes. That's a great thing, though, by the way. Like, yeah, let's create memories. Let's create opportunities for our families. Let's connect with people. Let's reach out a little bit. Let's maybe make some new friends. Let's do something different. Let's have a different kind of experience. Let's make some plans. We're going to have maybe a little extra time off. All those things. Like, these plans are great, and all these plans are good. It's almost like we got a small business, and we've been a devout Jew, and we followed the law, and we've got a wife that we're going to take into our own home, and she's going to be great, and I love her family, and she loves my family, and we're going to grow up in this tiny little town called Noonan, Nazareth, right? We've got plans. We've got plans. But what happens when our plans force us to overlook or discard God's opportunity? We got to be really careful that we don't book ourselves full, so full, that when the craziest, most ridiculous opportunity presents itself, we don't say, no, keep your beach ball, because I got plans. Think about what we miss when we say no or overlook or discard God's opportunity. Think about it. Just an aside. Man, if you're a dad in the room, completely unrelated, we're in the same boat. There's only one guy that's supposed to be your kid's father. Now, he's not the son of God, or she's not the son of God, right? Like, they didn't actually hang the moon. But it's still, they are super special. They are crazy unique. They're incredible gifts. And sometimes it's incredibly inconvenient, isn't it? But it's just you. You're the only one that's supposed to get that opportunity. The only one. It's just supposed to be you. So you better make the most of it, no matter how inconvenient it is. Even if it takes you to Egypt. Opportunities. We've got to be flexible enough that we can plan. Let's make our plans, right? I think that's a good thing. What kind of man doesn't say, I want to build a barn or a house or whatever it is, and doesn't first consider the cost? Who doesn't first say, hey, let me see how this is going to work? Plans are great. Man, being alive and awakened and aware of the opportunities that God would put in our place, let's not miss those. Now, I'll tell you, a lot of times, the opportunities that God gives us, they're not coming from an angel. You know the way that God works 99% of the time in our world today, in this particular age of God and human relationship? 99% of the time, he still does the miraculous. He still does things we cannot explain. That happens. But 99% of the time, he works through Holy Spirit-filled believers and followers of Jesus. And so oftentimes, we're the ones that God will work through to extend the opportunity to other people. And in this particular Christmas season, people who are disconnected from faith are interested in exploring the possibility that maybe Christmas is more than just gifts to return to Target the very next day. That maybe there is something a little bit more significant to the season. That maybe there's a light that's more significant and pretty to look at than the Gaddies or some Christmas tree on top of a building that's synced to music. That maybe there's something more to that light. And they're searching for and they're looking for, and the truth is, you know the answer. But are you making yourself available to extend the opportunity to them? Are you allowing yourself to be a part of the 99% of the time that God decides to do and move significantly in other people's lives? Are you available, or are you booked? Are you completely full? That's a question we've got to wrestle with. And I don't want you to get super theoretical and talk about I just want you to think about the next 2 weeks. Just the next 2 weeks as we continue to move towards Christmas Eve. Just the next 2 weeks. What's on your calendar? What are your plans? And are they flexible enough that if God were to give you an opportunity to do something completely different, would you be flexible enough to say yes? Because I believe that when the people of God make themselves available to the plans of God, he will give us incredible opportunities. And Lord knows that the people in our community, there's a number of them, overwhelming majority, over 60% of our community are disconnected from faith. So if you walk through the next 2 weeks and you see that there was no opportunity, it's because you missed the opportunity, not because the opportunity wasn't there. Let's make the most of the next 2 weeks. It might cost you the next 8 or 9 years. Man, if you get to be the one, just think of the wreck it would be if you missed it. We make plans. God makes opportunities. I'll take his opportunity over my plan any day.